He's a very big advocate within the cannabis community, man. Make some noise for the CanniMedic, a.k.a. Stanley Atkins II. What up, man?
What up, man?
Good morning,
man, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Doing good.
We're all in a space and place where we can't wait to get off, for obvious reasons, obviously. But, you come from a world where you operate in a place of advocacy where, like, you've been always, like, very, vigilant about pushing the agenda that, hey, listen, there are things about marijuana that are good, and it's actually helping people and changing their lives every day. For people who thinks it's all about getting high and whatnot, explain your platform.
So my platform is a educational-based platform. I come from a background in emergency medicine. I spent 7.5 years as a firefighter paramedic in Clayton County, working in the 911 system. And I actually became a patient myself years ago. And I realized that people weren't uneducated when it came to cannabis. They were more so miseducated. They know things, they just know the wrong things, and they're going about them the wrong way. And due to some health issues myself, which actually forced me into early retirement, I realized that cannabis should be used as therapy in lieu of pharmaceuticals. So I've started to research, and I realized that our people had been misled for so long, conditions such as seizures, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, cancer, PTSD. Many patients could be helped by using cannabis in lieu of all the drugs we've been prescribed for years. So I realized that the states that had cannabis agendas or cannabis referendums, it started with advocacy. It started with the citizens who realized that these legislators work for us. So everyone wants to know, like, how they do it in Colorado and California and Maryland and these other places. It took people to go down to their state capital, learn who their legislators are, and tell their legislators why they should support cannabis reform and cannabis legislation. And what that does is actually push the agenda to the forefront to where it's not so much looked at as a criminal issue, but more as a public health issue. And what we did was we started at the Capitol. You go to the committees, you find out what laws are being proposed. Georgia has had a medical cannabis law since 2015, which is HB1. And there's 17 qualifying conditions in the state of Georgia. And once I realized the power that I had when it came to making an impact with our legislators, I knew that I was doing the right thing, because sometimes it has to be a different voice in the room. Oftentimes when you see places that are pushing for cannabis reform, it's people that don't look like us.
Right.
Black babies have seizures. Black women have breast cancer as well. But when you look in the High Times magazine and you look on Vice, the people that were portraying this industry was the polar opposite. And I realized that we had to continue to push for reform if we ever wanted to change the narrative.
Now, if you live in a city where, marijuana isn't legal, but maybe you're having issues, whether it's MS, whether you're having seizures, whether you're, dealing with all types of neurological disorders, how can you find out what is the path that you should take? Because I tell people all the time, marijuana isn't for everybody. Like, there's some people who I've seen use it and they level up and they're the dopest versions of themselves. And I see some people spiral downward until they end up the guy on the couch and half-baked.
Right.
How do you find out what's right for you and if that's what the path you need to be on?
And that's a very good question, because a lot of patients in states like Georgia who don't have ready access to dispensaries to where there's a bud tender or a physician that's actually there to educate them. That's where people like myself come in. You have to start with talking to the patient in regards to what is the clinical condition in which you're seeking help for. Is it chronic pain? Is it addiction? Is it depression? Is it seizure disorder? And once you find out what they're seeking help for, that's when you can begin to say, okay, well, from notated research, these are the strains that are good with for anti-inflammatories. These may be the strains that may help you sleep. Because as you said, Headcrat, and you alluded to a great point, it's not for everybody. It is not the end-all, be-all therapy treatment. And it does not work for everyone. Everyone has an endocannabinoid system, and that's why cannabis works. And I'm not going to get too deep into the medical side, but it's just for short ECS, if you ever want to look it up. And that's your endocannabinoid system. And that is the auto-regulatory system that actually regulates all body functions within the human body. and this was discovered about 20 years ago. So for patients that may be suffering from anxiety, I would not tell them to try the same strains or the same types of cannabis as someone who's suffering from insomnia. And the reason I say that is because, as he said, there are patients who will eat an edible, they've never had an edible, and they completely freak out. There have been patients who've actually had induced psychotic episodes secondary to cannabis.
We tried to get Angie on the train. It didn't 100% work out.
I can't do it. My ECM, that's what you call it. The ECM it doesn't. My ECM is not compatible with marijuana, or I don't know the right strain. I need to find the proper strain, probably.
She ate the whole thing.
Yeah.
She should have probably went with half, but
she died. We saw her soul leave out of her body.
Yeah. And I don't ever want to do it again, Doc. I don't want to do it.
And I can totally understand that. As a paramedic, there are patients that had to go to the ER where I responded to 911 calls to someone that said, hey, someone made me some edibles. I ate the whole thing and now I think I'm having a heart attack. I think I'm dying. Because what THC actually does in some patients, that it can actually induce that paranoia. It can actually increase their levels of anxiety. And what that means is they may need a strain that's lower in THC and higher in CBD or higher in CBG or CBN. That way it doesn't induce the paranoia, but it actually just gives them that therapeutic effect.
I see. Now, do you have any advice for people who are in states that are legal that could possibly start a marijuana business by any chance, or get them some type of insight? Considering the fact there's a lot of startup people starting businesses right now with our current situation.
Yes. What state in particular? Is there anyone in particular in which you would have an interest?
In general, like what would be the practice? Let's just say, just to find out if your state is a state that you could start a marijuana business in. Let's start there. Okay.
So the first thing you would do is check for medical. No states go recreational unless they're medical first. California was actually medical from 1996 until 2018 before they went legal with Prop 64. So that's a very long time. That's 22 years. The first thing I would look up is what is their medical cannabis laws? What's the barriers of entry to actually get a dispensary or to participate in their program or to have a product service. Second, I would see if they have an adult use agenda, and that's kind of like your Californias, your Nevadas, to where it's fully legal as long as you're 21 with identification. But President Trump, there's one thing that he did a couple of years ago where he signed the federal farm bill, and now you can actually have your own industrial hemp license or industrial hemp farm in all 50 states. So for a lot of people, it's not so much about the THC, it's actually about the business standpoint. And I tell people a dispensary is the fastest way to hemorrhage $2 to $6 million, maybe even more. But if you really want to be on the upside of it, you would invest in a hemp farm. Just to give you a quick example, here in Georgia, we did a lot of work at the Capitol last year. And now in Georgia, you can actually have a hemp farm as the licensing is $50 an acre with a max of 100 acres, so $5,000.
Okay.
And in industrial hemp, everything that you're wearing, everything that you're sitting on can be made from hemp. And that's also where they're extracting the CBD from, is industrial hemp. And we've seen CBD all around. So there's ways you can actually get in right now. Yep.
That's so, Doc, thank you so much, man. If people want to follow the CanniMedic, where can they go?
They can go to CanniMedic.org. I'm also on social media on all platforms, and it's at the CanniMedic, TheCanniMedic, and that is hit me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm very responsible. I'm the Georgia chapter president for Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and I want to take the time to say thank you all this morning, because today is a day where everybody is trying to just get high and talk about smoking because it's 420. And I appreciate the calculated and educational approach that you guys took first thing in the morning. I'm very thankful for
joining us, and we got to get you to the studio once this whole quarantine thing is over. Much love to you. God bless.
Following you now.
Yeah.
We are the Morning Hustle.